I think they're two different things. But what did you make of these comments, Andrew?
Yeah, well, I mean, James MacMillan is obviously a famously talented musician, but he's quite well known for having very negative attitudes towards the SNP in general. So it's not perhaps entirely surprising to see this emerging and engulfing national collective, though I dare say they were somewhat shocked to find themselves the object of his ire in that way. I think it's maybe a useful thing for some nationalists to understand, though, that this very crude image of nationalism that you get from folk like Macmillan, and you hear from some people in the Labour Party as well, which regards it as inherently reactionary, only negative, has no positive things, is actually how they think about nationalism as such. And that I suppose on that basis it's very blinkered of them to suggest that nationalism is always reactionary. I would say I think you can make a good case for why you can have a kind of a left nationalism, a nationalism which brings people together and isn't just a question of exclusion, but actually is a really important reason why I care what's going on with someone up in Lerwick and I take an interest in someone that's living a life in the inner city of East Kilbride. It seems funny to me that we would say that it's left wing for me to be more atomized and individualistic and not try and use this weapon, this tool we have to try and bring people together in a very kind of divided and isolating sort of commercial and corporate system. So I think it's an insight into that attitude towards nationalism. But I think Macmillan is, as Thomas said, how could I put it? Maybe over-egging it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. But then this conversation sort of broadened out a little bit, and it started to be a conversation about should artists keep out of politics, and it was all very bizarre. And I tweeted a quote by George Orwell I've always liked, which is a kind of good killer for that kind of line of thinking, which is simply the opinion that art should have nothing to do with politics is itself a political attitude, which I think is pretty much on the money. But Thomas, I mean, you grew up in another country. Would you even have someone saying something like that in Denmark? It seems astonishing to me. Artists should keep out of politics.
No, I mean, it's never been the case, has it, that artists are part of society that try to change things. You can't have artists sitting in a wee bubble. Of course, you have some artists that are pro-establishment, you have artists that are anarchistic and so on, but artists will always have political ideas. I don't see how they could possibly stay out in any way.
This goes as far back as you like. Even if you think of like Michelangelo and the painting of Adam and God at the same level, not God above Adam. Now, okay, this is religion, which you might, and if you wanted to be unfair, call proto-politics in a way in that time.
Yeah.
But simply the fact that he put Adam and God on the same level is a political statement.
Absolutely.
And it's always been this way.
And there's also the fact that, that the thing about nationalism seen from a Danish perspective, as I blogged at some point, from, in a Scottish sense, everybody in Denmark is a nationalist. There are no non-nationalists in Denmark, from a Scottish perspective, in that everybody and every single person in Denmark thinks that Denmark should be a country. To some extent, nationalist in Scotland is not nationalist, is sovereigntist. Isn't that what they call it in Canada and in Quebec? I think they call themselves sovereigntists rather than nationalists. And to some extent, that is a better term. That's what we are. We are fighting for the Scotland becoming a sovereign country again, an independent country again. This is not nationalism in the sense that nationalism has in many countries. This is just about Scotland being a country again.
Yeah, I think you're bang on the money there with your Orwell quote about artists, if I may say so. And the Adam example in God is a lovely one, I think. And the idea that you can be insulated from politics is difficult for those of us to conceive of, I suppose, who might want to see the personal as political, who might want to see these kind of artistic questions in very political terms too, that politics is inescapable and it's just a fantasy to think you can do it. I think it is quite interesting, though, and here I'm going to be a horrible, dyspeptic, cynical lawyer person, to see how certain artists who are very involved in the debate use the artist's tag as if it was a particular source of authority, which I find quite interesting. Well, as an artist, I think that the independence debate is particularly this way or that way. And to be honest, I think, well, what is that adding? What kind of authority claim is that? To say, is it sort of a proposition that the artist pierces the very heavens, while those of us that are sort of muddy proletarians without an artistic spirit are, tied and bound to the plough and have none of this kind of access to the higher planes of... part of me really, as you might guess from that small tirade, gets a bit weary of this idea that it makes your views more interesting simply because you dash out a play or have occasionally written a poem.
Yeah, well, I think,
and I have written plays and have written poems too, but I find the artistic character a bit off-putting personally.
one night, a launch night at a gallery, will disabuse anyone of that notion. But yeah.
Do you know what I mean about that? It's a funny one. It's this sort of it's maybe an older fashioned kind of idea of the artist that sort of speaks to some sort of national authenticity. It's got all the kind of stuff that, yes, Scotland with its focus on governance, economics and such are totally different from, I think.
Okay, yeah, so because we missed quite a lot in the week off that we had, we need to clip through as many things as possible. So I think we should come to the Commonwealth, because I think we can handle that in about 2 seconds, really. We've been told that there's a possibility that Scotland would be expelled from the Commonwealth if it became independent. A simple 3-word question. Should we care, Andrew?
No.
Okay, Thomas?
No.
That's that. I think that's that covered to my satisfaction as well. Okay, so the last thing we want to come on to then was Andrew Marr. Before we named this podcast, one of the suggestions I had written down on my little notepad was instead of for all that, I had "Don't start the week with Andrew Marr" was one of my suggested titles. But his comments were that basically it's very out of date stuff. I think he's just that the whole Scottish independence thing's just about people not liking England, and that certain Scots are jealous of London Scots. I'll go to Thomas first. What did you make of these comments?
I think it's quite typical for London Scots that have been away from Scotland for 20 years that they don't really get it anymore. I mean, I don't see that Anglo-English feeling he's talking about. I mean, of course, I'm not English, so perhaps I just don't notice it or something, but I don't see it. Our local convener here in East Renfrewshire for Yes Scotland is English and so on. I just don't see this anti-Englishness anywhere. Perhaps it existed 20 years ago. I don't know. It's possible it did just before he left Scotland. But I mean, Scotland has really changed since we got our own parliament here and SNP in power and so on. I think Scotland has changed beyond recognition just in the 11 years I've lived here. So I don't think I think the problem is that the London Scots think they know Scotland because they grew up here, and they think they can sit in London and say with authority how things are in Scotland. And I think they should perhaps let people in Scotland make that call.
Yeah, well, I didn't see Marr's thing at the book festival in Edinburgh myself, but I was speaking to a few people that were there, and they said he cut, I'm afraid, not a terribly impressive figure, rather rambling, lost-seeming figure. So perhaps in some ways some of his uncertainty can be attributed to his recent bout of ill health. He recently also published a new opening chapter to a book that he wrote long in the past, which has been slated by lots of people for just being full of basic factual errors. He apparently referred to a Scottish SNP Green coalition in 2007, which is not the case. He just littered with basic factual errors that a kind of journalist on top of his game would just never have made. Even someone with access to Wikipedia and a kind of will to pursue it wouldn't have made these kind of errors. I think it's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm but a young slip of a man myself. I'm 26, so I can't speak to how these things have changed from much personal experience. But I do think it'd probably be fair to say that the kind of sense of Scottish nationality has altered, mellowed, and become more confident and less defined oppositionally to England. I think there's good evidence and a kind of persuasive feeling that that's the case in the country, and I think that's a really good thing. And I don't think it'd be wrong of us to kind of continuously re-argue the toss as if we were bound forever to what people might have done in the 1980s. I don't think that's really the way forward. I think it's also a bit strange that the Better Together type perspectives, those that are kind of warning about the perils of nationalism, are not just content to win. They want to win the constitutional argument and to be victims simultaneously. And it has parallels for me with the sort of white victimhood, the British majority stuff that you get from UKIP. And I think it's psychologically and politically a really kind of poisonous attitude to have.
Yes, I agree. It's just like they're looking for it. But also, one of the articles about Andrew Marr's new book had a quote by him that I found quite interesting. He said that whenever the London Scots get together in London, they always say, "Oh no, they wouldn't vote for independence. No, they wouldn't. Of course they wouldn't." It's like they're just making up their own mind down there. They're not. It's not that they engage with the debate up here at all. They read their own stuff. They talk to each other, and they then go on BBC or other national media and just say how it's going to be. I think they're going to get a complete shock when they wake up and realize that we voted for independence.
Yeah.
Do you mean the sort of the lovely image? I still maintain it of the ashen-faced David Cameron emerges onto the steps of Number 10 at sort of 5 o'clock in the morning to address the assembled British press to explain why Britain's gone up the Swanee. Yeah, I still entertain a kind of fond image of that. We will see.
Oh, no, my image is more about the police being called out and rescue teams because they've had to circle Ian Davidson's house because he's gone nuclear.
I don't know. He's more of an industrial revolution man himself. I'd see him more as a kind of coal-fired station rather than a zingy nuclear development myself.
Oh no, because I was going to try and sell him to North Korea then.
They need a dear leader. Maybe Pakistan needs another regional governor.
So yeah, we've covered quite a lot this week. It was good to talk to you, Thomas. Thanks for coming on. Hopefully we'll get you on again further down the line. Thanks very much.
Very welcome. It was a pleasure.
And Andrew, get in touch with me during the week if that £100 doesn't come through, okay?
Well, I do need it. I mean, much like Elliot Bulmer, I am dangling at the end of impoverishment, so I could probably do with a small bung, as it was described in some quarter.
So that's us for this week. Bye-bye.
Cheerio!
Bye!
Lingers round your fingers. Train a move on to Euston. Do you think you've made the right decision this time?
Has Michael got his dimmer on again?
Yes, he has. Sorry. Okay.